Buddhist Compassion, Navigating Global Challenges. Have you ever noticed how small our world feels these days? With a single swipe on your phone, you can see a wildfire in another country, a war thousands of miles away, or a family struggling because of floods on the other side of the planet. The world is connected like never before, but that connection also means we are constantly exposed to pain, fear, and uncertainty. And in the middle of all this noise, one question quietly lingers. How do we respond to a world that often feels overwhelming? Do we shut down and look away? Do we fight and argue? Or is there another way? Buddhism offers us a profound yet simple answer: compassion. Not the kind of compassion that's just a warm feeling when things are easy, but the kind of compassion that's active, courageous, and steady, even when the world feels heavy. The Buddha once said, "Hatred does not cease by hatred, but only by love. This is the eternal rule." It sounds beautiful, but in the middle of modern chaos, climate change, political division, economic uncertainty, how do we live this truth? First, we have to understand what Buddhist compassion truly means. In Buddhism, compassion isn't pity. It isn't just feeling sorry for someone. It's the willingness to see another's suffering as if it were our own, and to respond with both kindness and wisdom. Compassion without wisdom can become blind sentiment. Wisdom without compassion can become cold detachment. Together, they form a powerful force. Like two wings of a bird, they allow us to truly respond to the world. But here's the challenge. The modern world is designed to trigger reactivity. Social media thrives on outrage. News headlines are often crafted to provoke fear or anger. And in this environment, compassion can feel naive, almost impractical. Yet, think about it. Every major shift in human history towards peace, justice, and understanding has been driven not by people who gave in to hate, but by those who refused to abandon compassion, even when it was hard. Gandhi's nonviolence, Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, the Dalai Lama's gentle smile in the face of exile, all of these are living examples of compassion applied in times of crisis. So how can we practice this in our own lives, especially when global problems feel so far beyond our control? Let's break it down into 3 simple steps. Step 1. Start local, but think global. You may not be able to stop a war or reverse climate change by yourself, but you can practice compassion in your immediate relationships, with your partner, your co-workers, even strangers. Every act of patience, every moment of listening without judgment, plants a seed. And here's the thing, compassion is contagious. When someone experiences kindness, they're more likely to pass it on, creating a ripple effect that can travel further than we imagine. Step 2. Learn to hold suffering without drowning in it. One reason people avoid compassion is the fear of being overwhelmed, what some call compassion fatigue. But Buddhism teaches us that compassion doesn't mean carrying the weight of the world on your back. It means being present with suffering without being consumed by it. Meditation helps here. Even just 5 minutes of mindful breathing a day can give you the inner space to witness pain without collapsing into despair. Step 3. Let compassion guide your choices. Whether it's deciding what to buy, how to vote, or where to give your time, let compassion be your compass. This doesn't mean you'll always make perfect choices. It means you'll choose with awareness of how your actions affect others, near and far. Of course, this is easier said than done. I remember once, during a heated debate online, I was ready to fire back with something sharp, something that would win the argument. But then I paused. I thought about the Buddhist teaching on right speech. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I realized my words would do nothing but add to the storm. So I closed the tab, took a breath, and chose silence. It wasn't weakness, it was compassion for both myself and the other person. In a way, Buddhist compassion is like a lighthouse in a storm. It doesn't stop the storm. It doesn't control the waves. But it offers light, direction, and hope to those who are lost in the darkness. And maybe, just maybe, if enough of us become these small lighthouses, the sea of humanity becomes a little less violent, a little less cold. The global challenges we face, poverty, inequality, environmental collapse, are enormous. No single person can fix them all. But the Buddha never asked us to fix the whole world. He asked us to wake up, to see clearly, to act with love where we stand. So here's my invitation to you. The next time you feel helpless in the face of the news, the next time the world feels like it's burning, stop, breathe. Ask yourself, what would compassion look like here, right now, in my small corner of the world? Because compassion is not just a feeling, it's a daily choice. A choice that can cross oceans without ever leaving your heart. And in this fragile, interconnected world, that choice might just be the most radical act we can take. Buddhist compassion, navigating global challenges. Feeling overwhelmed by the world's chaos? What if an ancient wisdom, thousands of years old, held the key to navigating today's toughest global challenges? In this video, we'll explore how a Buddhist perspective on compassion can transform your understanding and give you the empathy you need to face modern difficulties. It's no secret, the world feels intense right now. Wars, political division, economic uncertainty, climate disasters, and all of it is available to us in real time, 24/7, on our phones. The moment you open a news app or scroll through social media, you can feel the weight of the world pressing on your chest. So the question becomes, how do we live in a time when suffering feels so close, even if it's happening thousands of miles away? Do we block it out? Do we become numb? Or can we meet it in a different way? Buddhism offers a radical yet deeply human answer: compassion. And not just soft compassion, but a courage-infused compassion, the kind that stands steady in the middle of chaos. The Buddha's words are simple but profound. Hatred is never appeased by hatred in this world. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is an eternal truth. It sounds beautiful, but let's be honest. When the headlines are full of cruelty, when people shout over each other online, when injustice feels unbearable, choosing compassion can feel impossible. And yet, it is in these moments that compassion becomes not a luxury, but a necessity. What is Buddhist compassion, really? In Buddhism, compassion, karu, isn't just feeling sorry for someone. It's the recognition that another's suffering is also our own, that we are not separate from each other. And because of that, compassion becomes an active response, not just a feeling in the heart, but a choice in how we live. Here's the thing, compassion in Buddhism always walks hand in hand with wisdom. Compassion without wisdom can lead to burnout, becoming so emotionally tangled in others' pain that we can no longer help. Wisdom without compassion can make us cold and distant. Together, they form the balance that allows us to face suffering without being crushed by it. Why it's hard today? Let's be real. Our modern world is engineered to keep us reactive. Outrage drives clicks. Fear keeps us watching. If you spend enough time in these digital spaces, compassion can start to feel like weakness, while anger feels like strength. But history tells a different story. The great changes in human society, the ones that truly healed, not harmed, came from people who refused to abandon compassion. Gandhi's nonviolence, Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, the Dalai Lama's steadfast kindness despite decades of exile. These leaders didn't choose compassion because it was easy. They chose it because it was the only path that could lead to lasting peace. So, how can we live this out? If compassion feels too big or abstract, here's a way to make it practical. Think of it in 3 steps. 1. Start local, but keep a global heart. You may not stop climate change or end wars single-handedly, but you can practice compassion in your direct relationships, the people you talk to every day. When you treat someone with patience, when you listen without interrupting, when you forgive instead of holding a grudge, you are planting seeds. And those seeds can ripple outward in ways you can't see. 2. Learn to be present with suffering without drowning in it. Many people avoid compassion because they think, if I open my heart, it'll hurt too much. But Buddhist practice teaches us that compassion doesn't mean carrying all the world's pain in your own body. Meditation can help here. Even a few minutes of mindful breathing each day creates the space to witness suffering without collapsing into despair. 3. Let compassion guide your decisions. It can shape everything: what you buy, how you vote, where you give your time, how you speak. Before you act, pause and ask, does this choice reduce suffering or increase it? This doesn't make you perfect. It just keeps you aligned with your deepest values. A personal moment. I remember once, during a heated political argument online, I was seconds away from typing something sharp, the kind of comment that wins but also wounds. My hands hovered over the keyboard, but then I remembered a Buddhist teaching: right speech. Ask yourself, is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? The answer, in that moment, was no. So I closed the tab, took a deep breath, and let it go. That tiny act didn't change the entire world, but it changed me in that moment. And maybe it kept one more spark of anger from flying into the fire. Why this matters? Buddhist compassion is like a lighthouse in a storm. It doesn't end the storm, but it offers direction, stability, and hope to those who are lost in the waves. And maybe if enough of us become these small lighthouses, the sea itself begins to calm. The truth is, we can't solve every global challenge alone. But the Buddha never asked us to fix the whole world. He asked us to wake up, to see clearly, to act with love where we stand, and to understand that even the smallest act of compassion matters. So, the next time you feel powerless in the face of the news, the next time the world feels like it's burning, pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what would compassion look like here, in this moment, in my little corner of the world? Because compassion is not just an emotion. It's a daily decision, one that can cross oceans without leaving your heart. And in a time when the world needs healing, that choice might be the most powerful thing we have. Buddhist compassion, navigating global challenges. In a world increasingly divided, can a seemingly simple concept like compassion truly make a difference on a global scale? This video dives deep into the profound Buddhist understanding of compassion, showing how its ancient principles offer surprisingly relevant and powerful guidance for navigating the complex global landscape we face today. We live in an era where the world feels both incredibly connected and painfully fractured. With a few taps on your phone, you can watch a street protest in another country, see a heartbreaking video of families fleeing war, or follow the unfolding of a climate disaster on the other side of the planet. And yet, despite this connection, it often feels like we are drifting further apart, divided by politics, culture, ideology, and even basic facts. It's easy to ask, what difference can one person make in all this? If nations can't agree, if leaders argue endlessly, if billions of people each carry their own struggles, how can something as soft as compassion possibly shift the tide? Buddhism offers an answer that's both humbling and empowering. Compassion is not small. It's not sentimental. And it's not passive. In the Buddhist view, compassion, karu, is an active force, one that can dissolve barriers, heal division, and even transform the way we respond to the world's most pressing problems. The deeper meaning of compassion. In everyday language, compassion is often mistaken for pity, feeling sorry for someone from a safe distance. But Buddhist compassion is something far deeper. It begins with the understanding that all beings are interconnected, that another's suffering is not theirs alone. It touches the entire web of life, which means it touches us too. From this understanding, compassion becomes more than an emotion. It becomes a choice to respond, to ease suffering where we can, and to refuse to add more pain where we can't. But here's the paradox. Compassion requires both a soft heart and a strong spine. Too much softness without clarity, and we burn out. Too much strength without care, and we become cold. In Buddhism, compassion and wisdom are like two wings of a bird. Neither can fly without the other. Why it's so hard today? Let's be honest, modern life is not built to nurture compassion. Our news feeds run on outrage. Social media algorithms are designed to amplify division, rewarding us for reacting quickly and harshly instead of listening deeply. The sheer scale of global suffering can leave us feeling numb, powerless, or tempted to look away entirely. But history has shown that moments of great division are precisely when compassion is most needed. Think of Gandhi leading India's struggle for independence through nonviolence. Martin Luther King Jr. calling for justice without hatred. The Dalai Lama, exiled from his homeland, still greeting the world with warmth and humor. Their compassion was not naive. It was a deliberate, resilient force for change. How to make compassion real in daily life. When we hear global challenges, it's tempting to think that only governments, billionaires, or international organizations have the power to make an impact. But Buddhism teaches us to start where we are. The ripple effect of compassion can be far greater than we imagine. Here are 3 ways to live it out. 1. Start small, but stay connected to the big picture. You might not solve global hunger alone, but you can practice generosity in your neighborhood. You can speak kindly to a stressed cashier. You can choose products that support fair wages. Each act might feel small, but it contributes to a larger current of change, a current that grows stronger as more people join it. 2. Be with suffering without being consumed by it. Compassion fatigue is real. If we try to carry the world's pain on our own, we will collapse. Buddhism offers a solution: mindfulness. Just a few minutes of stillness each day, breathing, noticing, allowing, creates the inner space to witness suffering without drowning in it. This way, our compassion can remain steady instead of burning out. 3. Let compassion guide your decisions. When making choices, from what we buy, to what we share online, to how we vote, pause and ask, will this reduce suffering or increase it? This simple question can transform even ordinary actions into expressions of compassion, a personal moment of choice. I remember a time I was about to post something online in anger. It wasn't a complete lie, but it was sharp, designed to prove I was right and the other person was wrong. Then I thought of the Buddhist teaching on right speech. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? I realized my post failed 2 out of 3 tests, so I deleted it. In that moment, I wasn't just avoiding conflict, I was practicing compassion for myself and the other person. No, it didn't end the global crisis, but it ended one tiny cycle of harm. And that matters. The lighthouse in the storm. I like to think of Buddhist compassion as a lighthouse. It can't stop the storm, but it can offer light and direction to anyone searching for safety. And when enough lighthouses are shining, even the darkest waters begin to feel less dangerous. The truth is, we can't solve every global challenge as individuals. But the Buddha never asked us to solve everything. He asked us to wake up, to see clearly, to act with love, and to take responsibility for our own corner of the world. So here's my question for you. The next time you scroll past a heartbreaking headline or witness division in your own community, will you choose to close your heart or to open it? Because compassion isn't weakness. It's one of the most radical, world-shaping forces we have. And in a world that is increasingly divided, it might just be the thing that brings us back together. The empathy gap. Why we need compassion now. Have you felt it lately? That quiet heaviness in the background of your days? The news tells us about rising seas and burning forests. Headlines warn of new conflicts across the globe. The air online feels thick with arguments, hot takes, and division. Even in our own neighborhoods, people seem quicker to judge and slower to listen. From climate anxiety to geopolitical instability, it's no wonder so many of us carry an unspoken sense of helplessness. We scroll, we watch, we worry, and then we ask ourselves, what can I possibly do about any of this? It's a strange paradox. We are more connected than at any other point in history, able to witness events across the planet in real time. Yet that connection often leaves us feeling more isolated, more powerless, and more divided. The rise of othering. Part of this is fueled by something psychologists call othering, the tendency to see people who think differently, look differently, or live differently as somehow less than us. It's not new. Humans have been drawing lines between in-groups and out-groups for centuries. But social media has supercharged it. The algorithms that decide what we see are designed to keep us engaged, and nothing grabs attention faster than outrage. The result? We are fed an endless stream of content that confirms our beliefs and paints the other side as dangerous, foolish, or immoral. It's not just online. You can feel it at the dinner table when politics comes up, in the workplace when cultural misunderstandings happen, even at the grocery store, when a small act of impatience between strangers sparks a chain of silent judgments. When this happens often enough, empathy begins to erode. We stop trying to understand people. We start trying to win against them. And slowly, without even realizing it, we widen what I call the empathy gap. The cost of a widening empathy gap. When empathy shrinks, fear grows. When compassion fades, division deepens. And when those divisions harden, it becomes harder to solve the very problems that threaten us all: climate change, poverty, conflict. Think about climate anxiety for a moment. It's a global issue, but it also plays out locally. Some people see it as an urgent crisis demanding immediate action. Others see it as exaggerated or politically manipulated. When we approach these differences without compassion, we don't just disagree, we dismiss each other entirely. Solutions stall. The crisis worsens. Or consider geopolitical instability. Conflicts are often fueled not only by competing interests, but by decades, sometimes centuries, of dehumanization. Once we've convinced ourselves that the other is less worthy of care, compassion becomes optional. Violence becomes easier to justify. This isn't just a political or moral problem. It's a human survival problem. Is there an antidote? So we have to ask, is there a universal antidote to this cycle of distress and division? Buddhism suggests there is, and it's deceptively simple: compassion. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, nice idea, but it won't fix the world, let's be clear. Compassion in the Buddha sense is not about being nice to everyone or avoiding hard truths. It's not about passively watching injustice unfold. True compassion is active. It sees suffering clearly, understands its causes, and responds with the intention to alleviate it, whether that means offering a kind word or standing up against harm. Compassion works because it cuts through the illusion of separation. It reminds us that even if we disagree on everything, we still share the same basic human needs: safety, dignity, belonging, and love. How compassion bridges the gap. When we meet someone across the empathy gap, compassion helps us pause before reacting. It helps us ask, what might this person be afraid of? What pain might be shaping their view? This doesn't mean we have to agree with them. It means we refuse to strip away their humanity. And in doing so, we create a small but powerful opening, the kind of opening where real dialogue and real solutions can take root. I've experienced this firsthand. A few years ago, I was in a heated conversation with someone who held completely opposite views from mine on a social issue I cared deeply about. Every part of me wanted to argue point for point, to prove them wrong. But then I remembered a Buddhist practice, listening with the intent to understand, not to reply. I asked them to share their story. What I heard wasn't just opinion, it was layers of personal history, loss, and fear. We still disagreed in the end, but the conversation ended with mutual respect instead of resentment. And for me, that felt like progress. Compassion in action. So how do we bring compassion into a world that feels like it's burning at both ends? Start small. Your compassion doesn't have to begin at the global scale. It can start in your home, your workplace, your community. Listen more deeply. Speak more gently. Resist the urge to humiliate someone who's wrong. Stay informed, but set boundaries. Being aware of the world's pain is important, but so is protecting your mental space. Constant exposure to bad news without action leads to numbness. Choose when and how you engage. Act where you can. Donate, volunteer, speak up for those whose voices are silenced. Compassion is not just a feeling, it's a verb. The bigger picture. If this sounds small compared to the scale of global problems, remember this. Systems are built from relationships. Relationships are shaped by interactions, and interactions are transformed by compassion. When we choose compassion, especially in moments when it's hardest, we're not just closing the empathy gap between two people. We are weakening the larger structures of fear and division that keep us apart. And maybe, if enough of us choose it, compassion can become not just a personal virtue, but a cultural force. One strong enough to meet climate anxiety with collaboration instead of denial, to meet geopolitical instability with diplomacy instead of destruction, and to meet polarization with curiosity instead of contempt. The world will not be healed by more arguments won. It will be healed by more hearts opened. So the next time you catch yourself standing on one side of the empathy gap, looking across at someone who feels impossibly far away, ask yourself, what would compassion look like here? It might be the most powerful question you can ask, and perhaps the first step toward closing that gap for good. Ancient wisdom, modern relevance, defining Buddhist compassion. Have you ever wondered why, in a world with so much information, so much technology, and so much progress, we still struggle to understand each other? We can send a message across the planet in seconds, yet we still let small misunderstandings ruin relationships. We can order anything we want with one click, but we often forget the unseen hands who made it possible. We talk about kindness all the time, but when the moment comes to practice it, especially towards someone we disagree with, it's not so easy. This is where ancient Buddhist wisdom feels surprisingly modern. Metta and Karuna, the heart of Buddhist compassion. In Buddhism, compassion isn't just a nice feeling. It's built on two foundational principles, metta and karuna. Metta is often translated as loving kindness. It's the wish for all beings, not just your friends, not just people you like, but literally all beings, to be safe, happy, and at peace. It's a kind of goodwill that doesn't depend on whether someone deserves it. Karuna, on the other hand, is compassion in its active form, the desire to alleviate suffering wherever we find it. If metta is the warm intention, karuna is the action that follows. Here's the thing, these aren't abstract spiritual ideas. They are practices, which means they can be trained, strengthened, and applied in everyday life, from how you handle a tense conversation to how you choose the coffee you drink in the morning. Not just feelings, practices. Think about it. We all feel moments of compassion when we see a child fall and scrape their knee, or when we hear a friend's voice tremble on the phone. But in Buddhism, it's not enough to just feel it. Feelings come and go. Practice makes them steady. Metta practice might look like intentionally wishing well for someone you're angry with. Karuna practice might mean listening to a neighbor's concerns without rushing to defend yourself, even when you think they're wrong. And yes, sometimes it might even mean taking a hard look at the systems you're part of, asking questions like, do the products I buy support fair wages? Do they harm the environment? Compassion isn't only about our personal relationships, it's also about the ripple effects of our choices on people we'll never meet. Compassion in a disagreement. Let's take a real-world example. Imagine you're in a heated discussion about politics at a family gathering. Your cousin says something that makes your blood boil. Without practice, our minds default to defense mode. Raise your voice, gather your counter-arguments, make sure you win. With metta and karuna, the goal shifts. You pause. You breathe. You remember, this person, just like me, wants to be safe, happy, and understood. That doesn't mean you let their words slide, but it means you choose to respond in a way that preserves dignity, theirs and yours. Maybe you ask, can you share more about why you see it that way? Or, what's been your experience with this issue? You might be surprised at what comes out. Sometimes, compassion disarms more effectively than logic ever could. The hidden, global dimension. Now, let's zoom out. Compassion isn't only for people standing in front of us. It's also for people we may never meet, whose lives are touched by the decisions we make without even thinking. When you buy a shirt online, do you think about the factory worker who made it? When you grab a piece of chocolate, do you know if the cocoa came from farms where children are forced to work? This isn't about guilt. It's about awareness. Karuna, as active compassion, invites us to consider the hidden human cost in the systems we benefit from, and to make choices that reduce harm, even if those choices are less convenient. It might mean paying a little more for ethically sourced goods, or supporting companies that commit to fair labor practices. It might mean consuming less, but with more intention. Why this matters now more than ever. You might be thinking, sure, that sounds nice, but can a little compassion really make a difference in a world this complicated? Here's the truth. Compassion changes the tone of interactions. Interactions shape relationships. Relationships build communities. And communities create the cultural and political will that can shift systems. When metta and karuna become habits, they don't just soften our hearts, they sharpen our awareness. We notice the suffering we once ignored. We care about people we once dismissed. And we start to make decisions, big and small, that align with a world we'd actually want to live in. A personal reflection. I remember once waiting in a long airport security line. The person in front of me was clearly stressed, snapping at the TSA officer. My first instinct was judgment. Wow, what an attitude. But then I caught myself. I thought about metta, the wish for well-being, and karuna, the desire to ease suffering. I didn't know this person's story. Maybe they'd just lost a loved one. Maybe they were traveling to say goodbye to someone. So instead of adding to their tension, I let them cut ahead of me at the next checkpoint. They looked at me, a little surprised, and their face softened. It was such a small thing, but I'll never forget it, not because I changed their life, but because I changed my state of mind. Practicing daily. You don't have to meditate for hours to start living with more metta and karuna. You can begin right now. Morning. Before you check your phone, take 30 seconds to wish for the well-being of 3 people. One you love, one you feel neutral about, and one you struggle with. In conversation, practice listening with the intention to understand, not just to reply. In choices, pick one everyday purchase, coffee, clothes, electronics, and learn about its supply chain. See if there's a way to make a more compassionate choice. Small steps, repeated daily, turn compassion from a passing feeling into a guiding principle. Metta and karuna are ancient, but their relevance today is undeniable. In a time when it's easy to close off, these practices invite us to open up, to see the humanity in the person across from us, and the dignity of those far beyond our sight. In a divided world, loving kindness is not weakness. Active compassion is not naive. Together, they are the strength that allows us to face suffering, and to respond not with fear, but with the courage to care. Because the truth is, the future won't be built on the sharpness of our arguments, but on the depth of our compassion. Compassion in action. Navigating today's toughest challenges. When you hear the word compassion, you might think of small acts, holding the door for someone, donating to a charity, smiling at a stranger. Those moments matter. But what if I told you compassion could be a powerful tool for solving the biggest problems of our time? Climate change, geopolitical conflicts, and social injustice. It might sound idealistic, but in Buddhism, compassion, rooted in metta, loving kindness, and karuna, active compassion, isn't just a soft feeling. It's a deliberate practice, one that can reshape how we see the world and how we act within it. The climate crisis, empathy across time and space. Let's start with the climate crisis. It's easy to think of it as a technical problem. Greenhouse gas levels, rising sea temperatures, renewable energy solutions. But at its heart, the climate crisis is also a compassion crisis. It asks us to care about people we will never meet. The child in Bangladesh whose home will be underwater in 20 years. The farmer in California whose crops are failing from drought. The polar bear standing on a shrinking sheet of ice. And it asks us to care not only across distance, but across time, to act now for the sake of future generations who will inherit whatever world we leave behind. In Buddhist terms, this is expanding metta and karuna beyond our immediate circle. It's not enough to recycle or drive less because it's the right thing to do. We act because we feel a genuine, lived connection to the people and creatures who will be affected. I once heard someone say, the true measure of our compassion is how we treat those who have no power to repay us. That includes the unborn, the endangered, and the unseen. Geopolitical conflicts, moving beyond blame. Now, compassion and politics, that's a tricky combination. When war breaks out or tensions rise between nations, our instinct is to pick a side. We assign heroes and villains, good guys and bad guys. But a compassionate lens challenges us to ask deeper questions. Instead of, who's right? We might ask, what pain or fear is driving this? Instead of, how do we punish? We might ask, how do we prevent more suffering? This doesn't mean excusing violence or injustice. Compassion isn't blind. It simply recognizes that every conflict has root causes, often generations deep, and that real solutions rarely come from doubling down on blame. Take the example of post-war reconciliation efforts in some countries. The most effective ones didn't focus solely on punishment. They also invested in dialogue, truth-telling, and rebuilding trust, because without those, the seeds of future conflict remain. Karuna in this context might look like humanitarian aid that reaches all civilians affected, regardless of which side they're on. It might mean creating spaces where former enemies can share their stories, and where listening becomes as important as negotiation. It's not easy, but if compassion can shift a conversation from us versus them to we are all stuck in this mess together, that's already the beginning of peace. Social justice movements. Compassion as the foundation of equality. Social justice is, in many ways, compassion turned outward into action. It's about recognizing suffering, whether from racism, sexism, poverty, or discrimination, and refusing to accept it as just the way things are. But here's something important. Real compassion doesn't stop at advocating for those we naturally agree with or understand. It requires a universal respect, even for those we don't fully relate to. In Buddhist practice, you don't pick and choose who receives your metta. You wish for the well-being of all beings, yes, even those whose values clash with yours. That doesn't mean tolerating harmful behavior. It means separating a person's worth from their actions, and believing change is possible. This perspective keeps movements from turning into mirror images of the very systems they fight against. For example, advocating for fair wages doesn't just help the underpaid worker you might meet, it also acknowledges the dignity of the unseen hands in the global supply chain. Supporting gender equality isn't just a slogan, it's an active commitment to creating spaces where everyone's voice is respected, even in difficult conversations. When social justice is fueled by compassion rather than just anger, it gains staying power. Anger burns hot and fast, compassion burns steady and long. The link between personal practice and global change. You might be wondering, this all sounds good, but what can one person really do? The answer lies in scale. Compassion scales up. The way you treat your neighbor influences the tone of your community. The tone of your community influences the values of your city. And those values influence the direction of policies and movements. It starts small. When you speak about the climate crisis, you do it without shaming people who are still learning. When you discuss a geopolitical issue, you stay curious instead of hostile. When you stand for social justice, you do it in a way that invites others to join rather than pushing them away. Each act might seem tiny, but collectively, They shape the cultural climate, and the cultural climate shapes everything else. A personal moment of awakening. I remember a time when I was reading about a devastating flood in another part of the world. The article had photos of families wading through waist-deep water, carrying children, holding bags with everything they owned. For a moment, I felt sympathy. But my day went on. Emails, meetings, dinner. It wasn't until later, during meditation, that I realized I had treated their suffering like background noise. That realization hit me hard. Compassion isn't just a fleeting ache in the chest. It's allowing that ache to change you, to influence your choices, your priorities, your willingness to act. The next day, I researched organizations providing direct aid in that region and made a donation. Small, yes, but more importantly, it reminded me, compassion dies in abstraction, it lives in action. Practical ways to apply compassion today. If you want to live this out, here's where to start. Climate. Before making a purchase or taking an action with environmental impact, pause. Ask, how might this affect those living decades from now? Geopolitics. When reading about a conflict, look for perspectives from all sides. Practice asking, what pain is driving this? Social justice. Show up, whether that means joining a march, signing a petition, or simply having uncomfortable but necessary conversations. Do it from a place of respect, not superiority. These practices aren't grand gestures. They're steady, intentional choices that build a compassionate mindset over time. The challenges we face today can feel overwhelming. But compassion, especially the kind practiced in Buddhist traditions, reminds us that the size of the problem doesn't diminish the power of the response. Metta and Karuna teach us that compassion isn't passive. It's the quiet, consistent force that keeps us human in the face of chaos. In the climate crisis, it's thinking beyond your own lifetime. In geopolitical conflict, it's seeing the humanity in your opponent. In social justice, it's fighting for equality without losing sight of respect. Compassion may not fix everything overnight, but it creates the conditions where solutions can take root. And in times like these, that's not just important, it's essential. Because in the end, the real question isn't can compassion change the world? The question is, can we afford to live in a world without it? Cultivating your own compassionate core. Have you ever met someone who just radiates warmth? Not in a forced, I'm trying to be nice kind of way, but in a way that makes you feel seen, valued, and safe the moment you're around them. That's not an accident. That's compassion, a quality we often admire in others, but don't always realize we can intentionally grow in ourselves. Compassion isn't just a feeling, it's a skill. Many people think compassion is something you either have or you don't, like being naturally funny or having an eye for art. But here's the truth, compassion can be trained, just like a muscle. Buddhist traditions have been saying this for thousands of years, and modern science is now catching up. The more we practice compassion, consciously and consistently, the stronger it becomes, not just in our minds, but in the way our brains are wired. So how do we actually do that? How do we move from wanting to be compassionate to living it every day? Tunglen, breathing in pain, breathing out kindness. One of the simplest, yet most powerful, practices for developing compassion comes from Tibetan Buddhism. It's called Tunglen, which means giving and taking or sending and receiving. Here's how it works. You sit quietly. As you breathe in, you imagine inhaling the pain, fear, or struggle of someone. It could be a loved one, a stranger, or even yourself. As you breathe out, you imagine sending them relief, comfort, or whatever they most need in that moment. At first, this might feel counterintuitive. We are used to wanting to avoid pain, not breathe it in. But Tunglen flips that script. It teaches us not to turn away from suffering, our own or others, but to meet it with courage and care. I started practicing Tunglen during a time when a close friend was going through a divorce. Every time I felt helpless because I couldn't fix things for them, I would sit, breathe in their sadness, and breathe out calm and strength. Did it magically solve their problems? No, but it changed me. It kept my heart open, instead of shutting down from overwhelm. The science backs it up. If breathing in someone's pain sounds too mystical, here's where science enters the chat. Research from places like Stanford and the University of Wisconsin has shown that compassion practices can lower stress levels by calming the body's fight-or-flight response, increase emotional resilience, making it easier to handle challenges without burning out, boost well-being by activating brain regions linked to reward and connection, One study even found that regular compassion meditation made people more likely to help others even when it was inconvenient. So yes, compassion doesn't just feel good. It makes us act better, too. Daily acts of kindness, the micro-practice. But you don't have to meditate for 30 minutes a day to build compassion. You can start right where you are, in the middle of your messy, busy life. Think small. Send a quick text to check in on someone you haven't talked to in a while. Offer to carry groceries for a neighbor. Let the person with 2 items go ahead of you in the grocery line. Take a deep breath before responding to someone you disagree with. These tiny acts might seem trivial, but they create ripples. Think about it. One kind gesture can shift someone's mood for the entire day. And when they feel cared for, they're more likely to pass it on. That's how compassion spreads, not always through grand gestures, but through ordinary moments repeated again and again. Start small, grow naturally. Here's the trap many of us fall into. We think compassion means we have to save the world. And that can feel paralyzing. But real change often starts in our smaller circles, our families, our friendships, our workplaces. If you're new to this, set a simple goal. 1 act of kindness a day. 1 moment of genuine listening without interrupting. 1 time choosing patience instead of irritation. It's like planting seeds. At first, the changes are subtle. A little more ease in conversations, a little less judgment in your thoughts. Over time, though, those seeds grow into a way of being. Compassion towards yourself. There's one more piece we can't skip: self-compassion. You can't pour from an empty cup. If your inner voice is constantly critical, it's hard to extend real compassion outward. Self-compassion isn't about making excuses or avoiding accountability. It's about treating yourself with the same kindness you'd offer to a close friend. When you make a mistake, instead of saying, "I'm such an idiot," you might say, "Okay, that didn't go the way I hoped. What can I learn from it?" Dr. Kristen Neff, one of the leading researchers on self-compassion, says it beautifully. Self-compassion is giving yourself permission to be human. And when we do that, we become much more capable of holding space for others' humanity too. Why this matters now. We are living in a time when compassion is both desperately needed and strangely undervalued. The news cycle rewards outrage. Social media rewards quick judgments. Slowing down to understand someone's experience, especially when it's different from ours, can feel like swimming upstream. But that's exactly why it matters. Because compassion isn't just about being nice. It's about choosing to stay connected in a world that's constantly pulling us apart. Every time you practice it, whether through Tunglen, daily acts of kindness, or self-compassion, you're pushing back against cynicism. You're saying, "I believe connection is worth the effort." Your invitation. So here's my challenge to you. Today, pick 1 small act of compassion. It could be as simple as holding eye contact with someone who usually gets ignored, or sending a kind note to a colleague who's been struggling. And if you want to go deeper, try Tunglen tonight before bed. Think of someone who's hurting, maybe even yourself. Breathe in the pain. Breathe out relief. Let it be simple. Let it be real. Because compassion isn't about changing the whole world in one heroic sweep. It's about creating tiny pockets of humanity over and over until they start to connect, and one day, maybe, they form something big enough to change everything. And it all starts with you, right here, right now. A more compassionate future, your role. Have you ever noticed how the word compassion sometimes gets misunderstood? People hear it and think it means being soft, or looking the other way when something's wrong. But that's not compassion. That's avoidance. Real compassion is something much stronger. It's not about ignoring problems. It's about meeting them head on, with wisdom, clarity, and a genuine desire to heal. What compassion really asks of us. Compassion doesn't mean you agree with everyone. It doesn't mean you let harmful behavior slide. What it does mean is this: when you're faced with pain, conflict, or injustice, you don't let your first reaction be judgment or revenge. Instead, you pause, you breathe, and you ask, what would help here? Sometimes helping means speaking up. Sometimes it means listening quietly. And sometimes it means offering someone the very thing they don't know how to ask for: understanding. The courage to see clearly. I once met a community leader who worked in neighborhoods hit hardest by poverty and violence. I asked him how he kept going, day after day, without giving in to anger or despair. He told me something I'll never forget. I stopped looking at people as problems to fix. I started seeing them as stories to understand. That's compassion. It's not about turning away from harsh truths. It's about looking directly at them, but through a lens that seeks healing rather than punishment. Where this meets your life. Now, I want to bring this closer to home. Think about one area of your life where tension shows up regularly. It could be that one relationship where communication always seems to break down. A coworker whose style completely clashes with yours. A community issue you've been frustrated about for years. Here's the challenge. What would it look like to approach that situation with more compassion? Not fake kindness. Not pretending the conflict doesn't exist. But real compassion, the kind that says, I see your humanity, even when I disagree with your choices. Personal relationships, a testing ground. Take personal relationships, for example. We often save our sharpest words for the people closest to us. It's easy to forget that behind the disagreement or the bad mood is someone carrying their own invisible struggles. What if, instead of firing back in the heat of an argument, you took a moment to ask, what's really going on for you today? You might find that the issue isn't actually about the dishes in the sink or the missed deadline, but about stress, fear, or feeling unseen. Compassion doesn't erase the problem, but it changes the way you handle it, and that changes everything. Compassion in community engagement. Now, scale that up to your community. Imagine if, instead of writing people off because of their political signs, their background, or their mistakes, we started by asking, what brought you here? What shaped the way you see the world? That doesn't mean you have to agree. It just means you're willing to listen before you label. And in that space, surprising things can happen. Bridges can be built where before there were only walls. Why this is harder and more necessary than ever. We live in a time when outrage moves faster than understanding. Social media thrives on quick judgments and one-sentence takedowns. It's tempting to join in, to pick a side and shout. But here's the thing, shouting rarely changes anyone's mind. Compassion, on the other hand, creates the possibility for change, because it's grounded in connection, not division. And connection is what humans are wired for. We are social creatures. We survive and thrive not by outshouting each other, but by finding ways to live and work together despite our differences. One small shift. So here's my invitation to you. Think of just one place in your life, one relationship, one conversation, one corner of your community, where you could try a more compassionate approach this week. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be as simple as choosing curiosity instead of criticism, offering help without waiting to be asked, taking a breath before replying to a comment online. That's it. One shift. Why it matters. You might think, what difference can one small act make? But compassion works like water. One drop might seem insignificant, but enough drops together can carve canyons, reshape landscapes, and change the flow of entire rivers. When you choose compassion, you don't just affect the person in front of you. You set off a ripple. You influence the tone of the room, the direction of the conversation, and the way others feel safe enough to show their own kindness. The future we could build. Now, take a moment to imagine this. What if every person watching this video decided that from today onward, their default mode would be compassion? Not weakness, not avoidance, but the strong, clear-eyed compassion that seeks to heal rather than harm. What kind of workplaces would we have? What kind of neighborhoods? What kind of nation? The truth is, we can't control everything that happens in the world, but we can control how we meet the world. And if we meet it with compassion, we change the conversation, and maybe, just maybe, the future. Your call to action. So here's the challenge I'll leave you with. Today, choose one small place to lead with compassion. Try it once. See how it feels. Notice what shifts, in them, and in you. Because if we all did that, if compassion became the starting point instead of the last resort, we could build a future where understanding is as natural as breathing, and kindness is as common as sunlight. Imagine that world. And then, help me build it.